Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today is my friend Lee Charlton, who for a long time was the head of the NAACP in New Bedford and talks about civil rights and New Bedford history, and your background and your resume is impressive. I've known, I was telling you off camera, you and I have known each other for about over 30 years right now, and that's crazy.
Yes, it seems incredible.
But somebody whose opinion I've valued for a long time, and he's been a guest with me for different shows and wherever I've been, so I appreciate him coming in at this time. It's January. Yes. Obviously, there's Martin Luther King Day. Mm-hmm. February brings Black History Month, and I just felt bringing you in was a great time to talk about some issues and that we're looking at right now. And I know civil rights you're passionate about. You've been passionate about it for a long time, your whole life. And
well, I don't know how you can escape civil rights or lack thereof if you live in America.
Right.
Because this country was founded on inequities. From the very beginning, those people who wanted to be free from English oversight, the first thing they wanted was slaves. Because it was all about the money, all about the Benjamins, and it still is.
Right. You know, your experiences are just unbelievable. I mean, when I look at what you have, and just your lifetime experiences. You and I we've talked a lot over the years about different things that you've experienced. Right now, where do you see this country when you say civil rights and when you talk about it? Has there been improvements, really?
Well, there has been, I can say improvements, because the word has gotten out there that it need not happen like it has always been since most people been around. I see things a lot different. I've lived in or worked had the privilege of driving through 43 states. And I keep my eyes open on how certain people do certain things. And some states are more liberal than others. Others, I think of all of the 7 states I don't think I went to, I didn't want to go to them. But a couple of them didn't have bad reputations. The Air Force just didn't send me there. But some states, I could not believe how backwards they were, where people of color still were stepping off of the sidewalk, where they couldn't have eye contact. They couldn't have certain jobs. And if you go from one state to another and you say, well, why is that so? Of course, I'm from West Virginia, and most people don't realize the fact that West Virginia is the only state that seceded from the Confederacy because it wanted to be a free state. And the motto in West Virginia, for those people who don't know, is mountaineers are always free. And I found things a lot different in West Virginia when I went to other states. Some more progressive, and others definitely were way behind. Where people, I went to the first time trip down to New Orleans, and it was discernible. I went with the school department, and certain people had certain jobs. And of course, they have Creoles down there, except their Creoles are French and African. Up here is Portuguese and African. You have Cape Verdeans. And somehow, after 400 years, I once told my wife, we went past what used to be the State Theater, the Zeitarian, and it's got its name back now, and I saw a movie on there. And I says, as we drove by, I says, I had only been dating her for a couple of months, because I came in once every 30 days for 10 days and back out to sea. And I says, can we go to that movie? She says, they don't discriminate like that around here. I said, wait a minute. I've only been here a couple of months, but you seem to have the poorest education, the less paying jobs, and I says, also, all the things that count, you don't seem to have. I said, they discriminate. They just didn't tell you.
When you look at the issues that are out there now, obviously we're still talking housing and equal pay and all that. It's still the same issues that you dealt with 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
Of course.
But you do think that there has been some.
There has been some improvement only because the general knowledge has gotten around. I stated, that America is land of the fee and home of the buck, and it's all about the dollars. They'll call me Mr. whatever the name is if I got money, Unfortunately, money seems to be the common denominator between respect and no respect. If you got, at least in front of you, they will respect you.
And that's not a color issue.
That's not a color issue. That's everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of crime you commit. If you got enough money, they look the other way. I saw some guy on TV just the other day that he was accused of all kinds of crime, and I said, without money, he couldn't have got away with that. This guy has been accused of murders and all kinds of things, but yet and still, he died without being incarcerated.
You have a lot of friends. I mean, I don't know anyone that has says a bad word about you. You've worked with people over the years on different issues and different subjects. Is that missing today in general when it comes to trying to resolve differences from different?
It seems like it's my way or the highway, especially if that other person is in charge for whatever reason. And I had 30 people, at least 30 people, working under my supervision when I was at Volk. And I also was the first one that advocated and had a woman put in charge of all the custodians. And I told her, for those 20 plus people who reported to her, if she had a problem with any of them, send them to me. And she didn't. And this lady, I was very surprised that some of the faculty and some of the people in supervisors didn't meet her with open arms. But after she was about 6 months, when the report of how outstanding job she was doing coming in, then suddenly she had a lot of surrogate reporters and supporters because they discovered her, right? Not
Right.
Lee Charlton.
Yeah.
But I know how it was. This lady was doing things, so I wrote her up way in advance of the job coming vacant because I knew that was what I was going to have to do, justify putting a woman in charge of something. We had students that we hired, especially in the summertime, and I only had I had a problem with one student. Was from another country, and he was a very good worker. I used him during the year, but he would not take orders from a woman because of the country he came from. They would not do that.
Yeah.
He was an excellent young man, but would not take orders from a woman. Okay, I had students there who refused to go out and take jobs connected to their training in the school because that meant they would make more money than their father. Okay.
Really? Wow.
And so you got to understand the people. In the summertime, I would hire probably 10 teachers and let them pick out their students. And so I might have 50, 60 students and at least 10 teachers supervising them to do the jobs because we had a skeleton crew. Because you're in a vocational school, you had the best. I write out a job order, and it would be part of their training. They would come up and do it. It was amazing to me when I first saw it to see a kid who walked in that school as a freshman, not knowing anything, and in about 3 years had a swagger because not only he knew where the light switches was, but he could wire them. And that was amazing to see the confidence in those young people when they got the training.
You've said before to me, and I still remember this, that you look at yourself in some ways as a teacher.
I had to.
Yeah.
Because they thought they could come to me and they would send them up to.
And by the way, you said that with pride too.
Oh, with pride, yeah. And I did go around and I did fill in some classes and brought them up to date on steam engineering. Because I've been a licensed steam engineer in the state of Washington, New York, as well as Massachusetts. And in New York, IBM operated under my license. At the time, the IBM, who ran the Job Corps right next door, I started working with them. I was their plumber, pipe fitter, heating guy, because I also have a license. I have my contractor's license, HVAC,
Yep.
for refrigeration, heating, and also steam engineering, also master pipe fitter's license. So my whole deal with that, and I was told by a civilian employee of the Air Force, it's easier for me to teach a person how to do your job than to teach you electricity. And he gave me a list of courses to take in Tacoma, Washington. And that's what I did, and that's where I got licenses. And I went to every school I could go to, or I took the correspondence courses. That's how I did it for the 8 years. And if I didn't understand something, I couldn't understand why people of color were getting such a short shrift in the Air Force. So I took the course of UCMJ, Unified Code of Military Justice, because I want to know why. So I took the course. I found out why.
Was it hard to be a man of color in the Air Force?
Oh, yes. I was one of the few that got kicked off of one tower because they didn't like my attitude. I thought I was as good as everybody else. And when the commander told me they were switching me over to Tower 2 from Tower 3, because, and then I heard from one of my fellow African Americans from Arkansas that many of the white sergeants didn't like me because they didn't like my militant attitude, they call it. And so they moved me over, and they sent a white sergeant who didn't think he was getting necessarily the right treatment that he deserved because he was a sergeant. Well, shortly before I was supposed to get married, I came in. We normally spent 30 days at sea and come in for 10. And I had told my my wife-to-be that we were going to get married on next time in. Well, instead of 30 days, because they didn't have enough engineers below decks, I spent another 18. So I spent 48 days down there, and as when a helicopter did show up and we flew back in, as soon as I got to the base to pick up my clothes to come to New Bedford, and her whole family knew all about the impending wedding. As soon as I walked past the phone rang, and they had to evacuate 8 hours after I left because a storm was coming. And the commander, assistant commander, who was on shore, says, "Can you meet the helicopters? We want to fly you back out there because we got to have someone start up the heat." And I said, "Sure." I jumped on and I went out and I got everything started, and it had gotten so cold in that interim that they left water in the sink in the galley turned into 2 bowls of ice. It took me over 8 hours to get the place back up to 55 degrees, burning oil by the barrel. And after 2 days, by the time they came back, the commander that was filling in for the other commander told me to my face, "If they have any more goof-offs like you, I want them over here." 30 days later, I was promoted, and I hadn't even been considered out of 33 people for promotion 2 months before.
Let me ask you, you've had a lot of success in your career, a lot of important jobs. Does your success, is that a hindrance with with other people who haven't achieved that success?
Sometimes it is resented. My son, who works for the Mass Highway, ran into that same thing because he has 81 towns under his supervision. My grandson, who works in town here as IT, he ran in some of that. That can be petty jealousy
from people
who thinks that for whatever reason that you were promoted, not for any other reason that you're a person of color, and they were trying to make a statement.
But did you get resentment from people of the same color too?
Oh yes.
Which I don't.
You're right. Well, believe it or not, I think that's human nature. Why not me?
Yeah.
Why not me? Every time someone hits the lottery, I say, why not me? But,
Well, yeah.
but getting back to it, I found a lot of resentment from people didn't like me, didn't know me. But I would never reply in kind, because you can't allow other people to decide your mood.
Yeah.
So for the people who replied, because they didn't like me or whatever, that's their burden. A hate is too great a burden to share. I'm not going to carry that around with me. That means that my digestive system stops working. If you find out what that stuff does to you every time you don't like someone when they walk in the room, you are the loser on that one.
Yeah.
And so I refuse to join that group. If you don't like me, it's on you.
We are talking with Lee here on A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall. Black Lives Matter and the issues that have sprung up, I don't want to say the issues, they've always been around, but they took center stage really a lot last year in 2021. I'm curious as to your thoughts on when you look at the police issues that have come up over the last year and some of the things that you've seen, and just your thoughts on those.
Well, the fact that you have so many different groups that spring up overnight, there is no coordination.
And by the way, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm just,
No.
You worked with a lot of police officers during your
Absolutely. The resource officer, I was against them talking about removing resource officers from the schools. I can recall when they first came up with the idea, and one of the first Cape Verdean cop who came back and with the training tape on what a resource officer possibly could do in the schools, and I signed on. I recommended the person who wind up, and I still got the letter that I wrote on her behalf, Sergeant Rita Ribeiro,
who was a great lady.
She had asked me if I would recommend her. Not only did I recommend her as a resource, I recommended her to head it up. And I says, especially in New Bedford, with people coming from all over, where women were not accorded the same accountability and respect that men, it would do New Bedford especially well if they could see a woman in charge, and she was put in charge.
Yeah. Now you were talking, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but you were talking about the protests and what you saw over the course of last summer, really.
Right. Well, most of it had no direction. It's a two-edged sword. If you're going to stop liking people because of colors, where does that end? Because some of my best allies have been people of color, and people of not of color. I didn't think they would like me at all. I once had a conversation with a fellow who was originally from Oklahoma, and he worked in my department. So rather than run out of this in Tacoma, Washington, McCord Air Force Base, I would wait till the second shift came in, and I'd fill him in on what happened during the day. And one day he stood erect, set up erect in his chair, and he says, if I was home, we couldn't have this conversation. He says they told him that a person of color had no advice that he need value. I couldn't teach him anything. And he found out for himself, and I watched him get angry because people he trusted told him that.
Yeah.
And when he got married, I was the first one he invited to his wedding.
That's a good
No, I met people all over the United States that impressed me. I don't have permission, but I don't think the family would mind. I had some of those thoughts before too. When I saw people, and I saw based on their last name where they came from or might still owe allegiance to. But the guy I have the greatest appreciation for is a guy named Harry Cummer. Harry Cummer. If you wanted a decent human being, base it on Harry Cummer. And when we first opened up New Bedford High School, and Harry was straight out. Harry didn't pull no punches. Harry told you what he thought about it. And I remember when we opened up, and they had the first meeting was in the field house, and they met the parents and all. And Harry says, "This is not Burger King. We don't do it your way here. We have rules and regulations because it's a vocational school. We're teaching people to do things, and they deal with hazardous equipment, and we cannot chance them not doing it the right way." So Harry was law and order.
He get hurt.
But Harry told you what he meant at all times.
Yep.
I had Harry on my redress committee. Many a times Harry and I would march into schools, not in the New Bedford area necessarily, Dartmouth, wherever, and Harry would read them the riot act. And I saw them pleading with me to call Harry off because Harry would not put up with it. And we had people like that, and several people, the list would be too long to mention, of people all over these United States that made me rethink my original thoughts that everybody is going to dislike me because of my color. No.
Well, I got two questions. We got about 7 minutes left, and I want to ask you. I know you've met John Lewis. I know obviously you
Yes.
were you worked for civil rights during Martin Luther King.
Right?
With those, Andrew Young, Ambassador Young, Mayor Young, where do you think that what they would say right now about the times that we're in?
Well, I would think they would call people to reorganize themselves on what the lasting solution is. Many times, by being, nothing is 100%. I don't think some of the people who are complaining about the Black Lives Matter are absolutely, because some people take it too far. If Black Lives Matter, what has that got to do with looting? What has that got to do with breaking laws or abridging someone else's rights? That doesn't give you right because somebody else did something. You got to stay with the organization, and you've got to make the best of the laws that you got. You got to make them work, apply to everyone. If I'm going to be lawless, and you got a right to be lawless. I think one thing I'll leave you with, most people don't know when they call cops cops. Why do they call them cops? Well, I'm somewhat of a historian, and I read all the time. Back in the Old West, when they had all these people in these little towns, and the guy with the biggest gun and the quickest hand was in charge. Well, when they started hiring people to enforce some civil laws, and they deputized them in these little small towns, they used to give them badges. Those badges was made out of silver. In a short while, they didn't have enough badges out of silver. They made them out of copper.
Yeah.
So, and of course, they contracted that from copper to cop. So everybody knows how to call things copper, but did they know how that became a part of the language? I doubt it.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about too, you were instrumental at the start of the New Bedford Historical Society. As you approach Black History Month, I'd like to think that in my, and again, I started living and working in New Bedford when I graduated from school. I grew up in Wareham, as you know. I'd like to think that the history is certainly more well known in New Bedford. There's more, but you must be proud of the fact that what the Historical Society and the history that's been told to people in the city.
The quincentennial was it 1995 when New Bedford
turned 150, yeah.
Turned 150. New Bedford before that was Bedford Village and just the stepchild of Dartmouth, where all the elite folks lived. And I came here, and having gone to Frederick Douglass High School in West Virginia, I still got my letter when I first played football for Frederick Douglass High School. And I later on integrated the school that was a couple blocks down the street from me, and the first person of color to play football for the Huntington Pony Express was their name.
I remember you telling me that.
And I still got, after over 60 years graduating from that school, I still have teammates that email me. Okay? And I recall one thing when I walked into that door, and I walked in and it got deadly quiet in there because everybody in the room was white, and there were over 100 people. I walked in, and suddenly from people talking, it got deadly quiet. But I looked around the border of the room and I saw signs, slogans, and it says, one I still remember: we furnish everything here but guts. I brought the guts.
Yeah.
But no, I found out life is pretty much what you make it. You can't have everything your way. It's a compromise. And if you try to do the best for other people, some people will reciprocate.
And that's a word that, is just tossed aside right now, compromise. The
You
old,
got to. You can't
the
have
old,
it all
I'd
your
rather
way.
have, 60% of something and then keep working toward that 100%. But now, and you said it early in the broadcast, that people, they want it all. It's either their way or the highway. And I don't know if it can, somehow we've got to get back to the compromise.
We got to get back to some kind of sense of normality, where you have rights, I have rights, and we have the right to bargain and to come to some solution over what's best for all of humanity. Just not for me, but for you, forever. We got one planet. We're all on it.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
It's good seeing you.
Good being seen. I tell people it's better to be seen than viewed.
That's true. Lee Charlton has been our guest on A Conversation With, and my thanks to him for coming in, and we will talk to you again soon. Thanks for that.
My pleasure.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.